All right, so welcome to this little clarification on discussion board 1. I wanted to take the time to make this clarification because it applies to all of your questions, and because we don't have face-to-face meetings in this format, I've done my best to clarify this through the syllabus, but some of these are nuanced, and I didn't think it was practical to have 12 separate conversations where I clarify the same thing. So let me take a step back. This course is a survey and research methods, right? The way we're going to learn, the way your learning occurs here is there's 15 different units. You read the text, you follow the PowerPoints, there's supplemental materials. You take that information that you learned, you apply it to a study guide to self-assess, you apply it to a quiz to self-assess. Obviously there's grades that follow along, but those don't have a high impact. And that helps solidify and consolidate your learning. On top of that, really what's at the heart of this course is the research project that you do. Now, it is important, and I don't want to disappoint you, but it's important that you understand the research project is a learning experience. The focus of it is a learning experience. I still want you to be excited about it. I want you to be invested in it, in the topic, and in the research that you're doing. You need to understand this is not publishable. This is not moving through an IRB, an Institutional Review Board process. You're not allowed to publish or present this data. And so when you do a master's thesis, when you do a doctoral level or any other research, it would be required to go through an IRB. You'd have advisors. You'd have a committee. You will have moved through 5 or 6 statistical analyses courses. And so likely you'd be doing experimental design. So that's not what this is about. This is about the process. And so, so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I just want to remind you, this is about the learning process. And so specifically, I think in this week's materials or last week, there's information from U of M's Institutional Review Board that talks about what requires board approval and what does not. None of these will go through board approval. That can take 30 to 60 to 90 days. That's not in the scope of what we're doing. This is about the process. This is about, by the end of this course, you will have gone through every step of putting together a research project for your own learning. And then you'll be able to do it or have a better skills to go out and do this in the future. So while I'm excited about what you're doing, you should be excited. You will gather meaningful data that may help you in your job, may help you solve work-related problems, but it's not publishable or presentable, and it's not an official research study in that regard. So that said, it's just important that that's at the heart of it. The reason I'm doing this video, and I'm gonna send you mini videos for the first time, feedback on your research questions, is that I don't want you to feel that, I want you to understand my tone. This is not a critical tone. I'm going to try to poke a bunch of holes in your research questions. I'm going to shoot down some of these. My goal here is to make sure that this is doable and that manageable throughout the course of the semester. The goal here is for you to complete your research project, not to make it the most elaborate and spectacular project that you can do. So I want it to be high quality, want it to be meaningful, but we're not going to collect hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of data points and hundreds of surveys. We're not doing statistical analysis. So some things that make it doable. You're going to want to stay away from experimental design. You're going to stay away from answering the why question definitively. So correlations, effects, you're not going to be able to measure those in a way that you truly would if it was because those are quantitative questions. I still want you, and this is a learning exercise, so we need to do quantitative and qualitative experiences here. That's why you have a research problem. That's why you have a hypothesis and a null hypothesis. Ultimately, those hypotheses all seem to be driven, many of them are driven with a question of why, and we're not going to be able to put together a study that answers those to the level that would be appropriate. But we are going to address those questions. Ultimately, your methods are going to be leaning towards adult surveys, surveying teachers, surveying parents, surveying other staff. You're free to do a public domain data review. So, for example, if you had permission to go through your school's data records that are not about individual students, but how's the school doing? Are the suspensions down? Is the achievement up? You're free to look at those things. Adult perceptions are going to be key, and those are going to be the key ways for you to capture your variables. So we're not giving achievement tests pre and post, IQ tests. We're not. Another thing, a matter of concern for the IRB, is directly interviewing kids. Now, I noticed that no one really has anything terribly controversial. You're not asking about sex, drugs, risk behaviors, cutting, suicide, things that would be highly controversial and require IRB approval. So most of your topics are safe, but interviewing kids, especially on the younger side, can be problematic. So those of you who are specifically going to think about data collection in that way, we're going to want to talk about that and see if that's something that we can work around, or I want to say soften. So you're able to capture and gather some meaningful information without requiring a ton of approval that's not really practical in this course. When it comes to surveys, we're thinking about your N, or your number of 20 as a max. 12, 15, 18, 20. If you think about 20 surveys, and each of them maybe have 5 to 8 questions that you're gathering information on, about gender or age, about perceptions of 3 or 4 different things, you're already up to 7 or 8 questions times 20 surveys. And then each question has a low, medium, and high, as on a scale of 1 to 5 maybe. So that's a lot of data to process. And that's sufficient for this learning exercise. So I want you to feel good about that. You may have set out that you were going to gather hundreds of data. You're going to survey everyone in the school. You're going to do pre and post data. That all sounds great. Save that for your dissertation. Save that for research that you're going to be able to publish and that you're going to be able to spend 6 to 8 to 12 to 18 months on. Again, I want you to be encouraged. I'm not trying to rain on your parade. The goal here is that you work through the research project in this course and complete this course successfully. So by the end, you'll be able to talk about, and you can observe relationships. A lot of your questions were about what's the relationship between X and Y. You're going to be able to observe those things in interviews, in adult surveys, in adult perceptions, but you're not going to be able to measure those things as directly as you should in an experimental design or in a quantitative study. So you're going to be able to talk about how things may or may not compare, comparisons that you see. There maybe is a relationship. There could be a relationship. And these are the type of things that you're investigating, like a qualitative study would. So those are some really kind of key clarifying points that, again, wouldn't and shouldn't have changed anything you've done. I've read through all your questions. I've read through everything you guys have submitted. Wouldn't change that. Basically, what I'm going to do is prompt you to think about, so how are you going to measure this with the limitations I just laid down? Because we want it to be doable. I have some questions about it, so I presume you're a science teacher based on some of your science questions, and you're planning on asking your children. Let's talk about how we're going to capture those things to make sure it's doable. It's IRB. It doesn't require IRB approval that we can't get. That it's safe in that regard. And so let's brainstorm some of those methods. This isn't your method section, but these things need to align. All right. So I know this has run on a little bit. I've repeated myself a little bit. I want you to continue to be really excited. I know you're really excited when you guys turned in these questions and you've been anxiously awaiting the feedback. The feedback will be forthcoming. And let's work together to refine these things, and then let's cut you loose so you can do your literature review and move on. Also know, if I haven't said this already, as you work through your literature review, it's perfectly normal that some of your questions may change. You may find there's a couple questions in here that it's my understanding that are clearly answered in the literature. It's the literature is very clear about some of these broad questions. So you'll want to refine those as you go, unless you're doing a replication, unless that's your intent, which is fine. You'll find that suggestion for future research may be where you want to pick up. So it's okay that you don't know that, or that you're not aware of that now. As you do your literature review, you'll find out some of those gaps. And then you'll be able to adjust your questions to answer them. All right. Look for my specific feedback, and keep up the enthusiasm, and we're just getting started. Thanks.